Hello everyone, so welcome back to my channel. So in this video we're going to see the next topic, that is usestate hook. Okay, so before reading the documentation, let's just create a practical application for it. What I will do is I will create a component inside the components folder. Let's say I'll name it as counter.js. Okay, now inside this file I'll simply write rfce. Now we got this snippet. I'll open the bootstrap because I'll take some layout examples from the bootstrap itself. So in the components thing, I'll open this batch. Let me copy this first batch from here because I want to display the headline for that counter. I'll copy this thing. Now I'll just paste the code here. But before that, I'll wrap them in the React fragments. Okay, I'll change the heading to counter, and the next is, let me just put it here, 0. What I want is, if I click on the plus button, this value should increment, and if I click on minus button, this value should decrement. For that I need two buttons also. Again, then I'll copy that from the bootstrap itself. So here I'm getting so many buttons, but I'll search for some large buttons. Okay, I'll copy these two buttons. I'll copy the first one only and then we'll paste it. After this I'll paste it. Again I'll paste it. The first one I'll replace the text with the plus, and for the second one I'll replace the text with the minus. I'll also change the classes a little bit. The first class I want to make it as success because I want to display the color of this first button as green. For the second button I want to make it as red color, so I'll replace it by the class danger, btn danger. I'll save this. Okay, now I will import this component in the app.js file. After the navbar, I'll simply write counter. Okay, now it is showing some error because we have to wrap them in a single parent component. I'll put them the React fragments. I'll cut this code from here and paste inside that. Okay, now I will save it and let's check the output for this. So now if I refresh it, okay, so now you can see we're getting this layout. Okay, what I will do is I'll make some certain space between the buttons. For that we have one more class, that is mx and my. So basically mx is for the horizontal space and my is for the vertical space. But here I want the horizontal space, so I'll put as mx2. So we have the values from 1 to 5. I'll put as 2, and now if I refresh it, it's loading. Yeah, you can see we got some space between them. Okay, one more thing I want to do is I want to keep them in the center. For that we have one more bootstrap class, that is text center. I'll just make it as a div itself. I'll wrap it in a div, and here I'll put the class as text center. Now if I save it, you can see we got it in the center. Now what I want is, if I click on this add button, the number should change into 1. I mean, it should increment by 1, right? So for that, what I will do is I'll create two functions, okay, on this on click event. For the two buttons I'll create one on click event, that is on click. Okay, I'll call one function for this and another function for the another button. But before that we have to create those functions. I'll create the functions before the return. Okay, what I will do is I'll create a variable so that I can update that variable's value. I'll create a as 0. Okay, I'll do one thing, I'll create counter only, counter as 0. Okay, now what I want is I'll create two functions. Function, let's say increment, again I'll create one more function, that is decrement. Okay, here I will do one thing. I'll update the value of counter equals to counter plus 1, and for the second one I'll do counter equals to counter minus 1. Okay, now I want to trigger these functions on the on-click event. I'll call the first function, that is increment, here, okay, for this plus button, and similar for the minus button I'll call the decrement function. I'll paste it here and I'll call the decrement function. Okay, now if I save it and check out, I refresh this. Okay, but before that I have to put the value of a here, only then it will update, right? Let's say I want to initialize the value of a with 1. I'll put it as 1. Save it and see the output. Refresh this. There's some error. What's the error? A is not defined. I have to check what's the thing. Okay, sorry, it's not A, it's counter. We'll refresh this again. So now if I try to change the value of this variable by clicking on this button, it won't change, right? Why is it so? Let's check out the reason for it through the code. As you know that whenever a code executes, it executes from top to bottom. The execution happens from top to bottom, right? So if the execution happens from the starting till end, okay, nothing will happen, because even if I'm clicking on this plus button, this component is not going to re-render again. That is the main glitch, okay, in this code. Because if I'm clicking on this plus button, I want to render this component again. It is not possible if I'm using a normal variable here, which is this counter. Okay, this is only possible if I use a state variable, and to create that state variable we use usestate hook. Okay, now you understood that why we need usestate hook, because it helps to re-render the component again, right? I want that if I click on this button, I want to re-render the component again so that I can increment or decrement that variable's value. Okay, so how we can do it? We'll import the usestate hook for that. I'll simply write usestate. You get the automatic suggestions for it. Okay, you can see it's imported at the top. Now I want the snippet for the usestate hook. I'll simply remove this variable's value. I'll remove it here. I'll write usestate snippet. Select this one. We get this snippet. Okay, so we have 3 attributes here. Let me just replace it by the another variable's name. So we have set the variable as counter. I'll put the second argument as set counter. I'll tell you, don't worry, just for a second I'm doing it. I'll use state, I'll put, let's say 1 or 0. Okay, so what does it mean is, we have this counter variable, which is the name of the variable. Next we have set counter. Remember that the set counter is not a variable, it's a function using which we will update the value of this counter variable. Okay, then we have this usestate hook. Inside this we'll put the initial value of this counter variable, which is 0 in this time, right? Now we'll keep this increment and decrement functions same itself, right? So we are going to trigger this increment function whenever we want to click on this plus button. So what will happen is, if I click on this plus button, this increment function will trigger. So now if I want to change the counter value, I will not change it like this. I'll use the set counter function, because to change that state variable's value, we have to call the set function for that variable, right? I'll put the counter as counter plus 1. Okay, similarly for the decrement, I'll copy this and paste it in the decrement function. Okay, and now what I want is, I want to subtract it by 1. Okay, I'll save this, and now let me check that is there any problem in this. No, there's no problem in it. Now we can save it and we'll check the final output for this. Now if I refresh the code, you can see, one second, it's loading. So initial value of the counter variable is 0. Now if I click on this button plus, you can see it is incrementing by 1. Similarly for minus also, right? Let's say I want to add one more button, that is restart. What I will do is I'll copy this code and create one more button that is for restart. I'll copy this and paste here. Okay. Now for this, let's say I want to create another function that is restart. I'll simply copy this function's value. Okay, I'll put the function name as restart. Okay, now for restart, what I will do, I'll set the counter value to 0 because I want to restart that value to the initial value. And what I will do for this restart button, I will call the restart function. Okay, and I'll change the class also because I want another color, different color. I'll put the color as warning because I want to display the yellow color. For yellow color, we'll display the class as warning. I'll save this code and check out the output for this. So now if I refresh this, so you can see we got another button that is restart. If I click on plus will increment it by 1, minus it will decrement it by 1, and restart it will change it to 0 again. So now you can see that using the usestate hook, how we have created a complete counter app. So yeah, that's all for today, and I hope to see you in the next video. For that, do subscribe my channel and hit on the bell icon for more such updates. Thank you so much.